Hello, welcome. I am Mr. Eicher. Nice to have you here via video today. We're going to be talking about measures of center and measures of spread, two important topics in statistics. So let's take a look at lesson 14.3. Suppose you had the following test scores: 68, 90, 98, and another 98. Find the mode, the mean, and the median. Choose the statistic you'd share with your parents. So the mode is the value that occurs most often. So the value that occurs most often is 98. So the mode, the most frequently occurring number, is 98. It happens 2 times. The mean is also known as the average. And to find an average, we're going to add up all the values. And we're going to divide by how many values we have, which would be 4. Doing that, we would get 88.5 as our average. And then lastly, to find the median is the middle number whenever they're ordered from smallest to largest. So the middle number, we don't have a true middle number, but it would be halfway between 90 and 98. So the number halfway between 90 and 98, we could just kind of average those two. That looks like 94. So the median would be a 94. So the mode is 98, the mean is 88.5, and the median is 94. Which statistic would you share with your parents? Well, sadly, in education nowadays and in Schoology, it's the average that's shared with parents. But it looks like it might be more appropriate to say, when they ask what's your grade, oh, well, my median test grade is 94. They might suspect something's going on, that you're using the median rather than the mean. Or you could even say, oh, my grade, well, I've made a 98 the most times. My most common grade is a 98, so I'm doing pretty well. So these 3, mode, mean, and median, we call measures of center. Technically, mode isn't a measure of center. It's actually a measure of something else, but at this point, we'll just talk about mean, mode, and median as measures of center. On the next question, we have you're interviewing for a job. The person who is interviewing you tells you that the average, or that the mean salary, of the 5 employees who work there is $58,000. Should you take the job? Well, $58,000 looks pretty good. However, if you actually knew what the salaries were, the salaries are $15,000, $15,000, $20,000, $40,000, and $200,000. Presumably the $200,000 is the owner or the CEO. You're not going to be getting paid $200,000. So should you take the job? I guess it depends. If you need a job, then probably. But if you're not desperate, I'd say probably not. That's because a measure of center that would be a better representation of the salaries would be the median. The median would be a better representation because you have these 5 salaries. The middle salary, now since they're ordered, the median is $20,000. That's a lot closer to a typical salary that someone gets. Most people get around $20,000. The issue is, why I'm saying probably not, is that the mean of $58,000 is not really that close to a typical salary. That's because this CEO or owner who makes $200,000 is overly inflating the mean to make it look a lot bigger than a typical worker at the company. So I wanted to share this question because sometimes we have to consider what statistic, the mean or the median, is the best representation of the data that we have at hand. Question number 3, I wanted to review box plots and dot plots with you. We learned those in a previous lesson. But this dot plot shows the percentage of electoral college votes earned by the winner of each of the 58 U.S. presidential elections from 1788 when George Washington won to 2016 when Donald Trump won. The box plot of the same data is also included. And I have a couple questions on this. First off, though, to win the presidential election in the U.S., you need the majority of electoral college votes. So if you're not familiar with the electoral college, each state has a certain number of electoral college votes. Bigger states with more people get more electoral college votes. I think California has something like 50 votes, whereas a small state, small population-wise, like Wyoming, might only get 1 or 2 electoral college votes. So winning the percentage of electoral college votes would make you the winner. Part A, describe any interesting features of the dot plot or the box plot. I'll just kind of walk through these and then you could write them down yourself as we go along. So let me zoom in. What are some interesting features of the box plot or the dot plot? Well, I think the first thing that jumps out at me at the dot plot are these 4 elections down here where it was less than 30%. The winner of the election earned less than 30% of the electoral college vote. Most likely it was split multiple ways, or some of the early elections in US history, as we were trying to figure out how the electoral college works, didn't have a huge majority of winners. Something else, there's a big gap right here. There's a gap. That's kind of interesting that no US president has won between 30 and less than 50. It is interesting though, you have these 4 elections that it looks like the winner might have barely won the election. They had just enough, 50%, a little, maybe 51% of the electoral college vote. And then you have these 3 up here. Those would be winning almost the whole country. I believe one of those was Lincoln in 1864. One of those was FDR in, I think, 1932. And one of those dots is Ronald Reagan in 1984, I believe. But those were pretty significant wins, those 3 points up there. It looks like kind of a big clump. We have kind of a big clump in here of, most commonly it's in the 50s, maybe 60s. So those are some interesting features of the dot plot. To remind you about box plots, the box plot marks the minimum is right here. That would correspond to this point. It marks the maximum right here, which corresponds to that election. It marks the median right here inside the little rectangular box. That's why it's called a box plot. Marks the median. So it looks like the median is about 65 or 66. It also marks the first quartile. We call that Q1. And then it marks the third quartile, Q3. So the first quartile would be right around here. That splits the bottom half of the data into 2 halves. So that would be 25% of elections. This is how many? The percentage of electoral college votes received. Whereas the third quartile up here shows us that 25% of the elections, the winner had between maybe 82 up to about 100% of the votes. So those are just a couple features from the dot plot and the box plot. Identify the median. To identify the median on a dot plot, it would be really difficult, but thankfully we have this value is the median, and it looks like it might be at about 66. So the median we can get from the box plot, and we would say that was 66, maybe roughly 66% of the vote. So half of presidents have won 66%, and half of presidents have won less than 66%. The mode, we can't tell the mode from the box plot. There's no way to tell what's the most frequent value just looking at the box plot, but we can tell from the dot plot. It looks like this value occurred 4 times, and then this value occurred 4 times, and that would be the most common. So it looks like roughly 50, we'll call it, and roughly 56 maybe of the vote. Both occurred. I think it would be amazing right now if in the video Mr. Montgomery jumped in and started talking about presidential elections. Maybe Mr. Johnson jumps in and talks about the Electoral College. That'd be really cool, but next time. Interpret the third quartile in context. The third quartile is this value, Q3, and it looks like it's about maybe 82. So as a third quartile, we know that at least 25% of presidential election winners, 82% of the vote. So we have 25% of electoral, so that would be all of these up here. Here's the third quartile. This would be a quarter, 25% of all electoral college winners in elections got at least 82% of the vote. This or more is pretty important. If you just said 82% of the vote, I'm not sure how many actually got 82. Maybe 2 of those dots got exactly 82%. Quartiles give us a range of values. So we have at least 82% or more. You could also interpret it more negatively. You can go that quartile and down and say 75% of electoral college winners got 82% of the vote or less, if you want to interpret that way. And then lastly, we have in the 2016 presidential election, Donald Trump won 304 out of 538 electoral college votes, which is 57% of the electoral college vote. Based on the box plot above, would you consider this a landslide victory? So in 2016, Donald Trump earned 57% of the electoral college vote. 57% looks like it might be right around here. 57%. Would I consider that a landslide? I don't think so. It looks like roughly 75% of all the other elections, the winner had a higher percentage of the vote than 57%. So we could state, no, in about 75% of elections, the winner earned more than 57% of the electoral college vote. Thanks for watching this part of the lesson. The next part of the lesson, we'll talk about measures of spread. So hope that was helpful, reviewing dot plots and box plots, as well as considering the mean versus the median as measures of center. See you next time.